Today we have Shreya Rajpal, right? Rajpal from Guardrails AI, and she's the founder of the company and the CEO of the company. So first of all, maybe I would like to ask you to introduce yourself and the company itself. What do you do?
Yeah. Thank you for inviting me. My name is Shreya Rajpal. I am the founder and CEO of Guardrails AI. The company really focuses on, adding a layer of safety, reliability, and robustness as you're working with large language models. So typically, if you're building applications with large language models, you'll find that they're really fantastic general purpose reasoner or reasoning agents, but they're not as good at, or they don't have the same level of, correctness as we expect from traditional software, right? So how do we really bridge the gap where we're able to harness all of the flexibility, all of the power, all of the world models that are trained within these large language models, but at the same time make them work at the same level as we make traditional software work, so that we can build really sophisticated, complex applications on top of it and unlock a lot of value. So that's the focus of the company. Our DNA is very open source heavy. So, we started from an open source framework that I created, also of the same name, called Guardrails AI, that works something similar to a firewall around your LLM and make sure that, any inputs or outputs that you're getting from it are things that you can rely on and are correct for whatever correctness might mean for you. And the company is really kind of building around the open source as a key engine that powers it. My own background, I've been in machine learning for almost a decade now. Started out doing a lot of research, first in classical AI and then deep learning. Worked in the self-driving space for a number of years, which is also where I took a lot of these ideas of validation, verification, building trust in these really high-stakes custom ML systems that I kind of took to Guardrails. And then most recently, before starting the company, I was the first hire and the ML Infra lead at an MLOps startup here in the Bay Area.
Okay, so I actually I've spoken with quite many people in this conference that are concerned about, maybe want to use large language models. They are concerned about the safety of it naturally, because some of them are from from healthcare, some of them are from banks. Would you be able to dig a little bit deeper of how you kind of construct these firewalls around? So I guess it's firewalls for inputs and for outputs. How do you plug into these enterprise systems? How does it work?
I'll talk about this primarily from the perspective of the open source. So how the open source works is it's a two-stage framework where what you do is instead of getting the raw response back from the LLM or sending the prompt directly to the LLM, what you end up doing is first passing it through a verification suite. And that verification suite essentially implements and executes a bunch of independent, checks and verifications that each encodes a certain correctness criteria. And the output that you get from the LLM is checked against that correctness criteria. And there's a quantitative scoring or a quantitative measure of how likely it is you're violating this specific criteria. And then, there's configurable policies of what you want to do if that criteria is violated. So as an example, if you're working in a regulated industry, let's say healthcare, and you are building, a customer support bot that does, scheduling or something, right? What you would typically care about first is making sure that there's no PII that leaves your, your infrastructure and then, gets sent over to a commercial LLM, or basically leaves your trust boundaries. And so what you can do is one of the checks that you run in this firewall is making sure that there's no PII or PHI or sensitive information, right? So we literally scan your output, detect any time there's sensitive information being leaked out, and then protect against that or correct against that. If you're building, once again, a chatbot, I think a key concern if you're in healthcare is making sure that there's no health advice, there's no medical advice that is ever given. So that will act as another independent check on top of the PII, making sure that there's no prescriptive advice. It's more suggestions, or it's nothing that can be that violates any regulations or compliance rules for you. So that's a high level framework of how it works.
How much of it is manual? So how much of the roles do the users have to provide? And do you use maybe some machine learning magic underneath to kind of find these.
Yeah, always. We're big believers in machine learning. So the guardrails under the hood can be machine learning based, can be LLM based, can be, rule based or heuristic based, and can also be like hooked up to some external system that we can kind of like ground that in. So the open source library basically has a catalog of guardrails across a bunch of many common use cases. But outside of that, we also essentially have, like a framework for being able to build and provide your own custom guardrails, your own custom verification checks that can be, like anything that you can write in a function, you can basically like run it. And so what we do is like bring your own custom guardrails or use our guardrails, our catalogs as configurable building blocks, and then we'll run all of them for you, orchestrate them for you, and make sure that, you're able to build trust in the outputs that you're getting.
So what was the hardest problem you had to solve, like when building this project?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think very candidly, one of the hard problems is that any LLM failure ends up acting as, like a guardrail failure. So what we essentially do are we have like verification checks, right? We can aid you a little bit in correction. Like we have like this whole reprompting, re-asking paradigm wherein, you can tap into this ability of the LLMs to self-heal. And you can essentially use their property of self-healing by, circling back the outputs and like giving them back. But fundamentally, you're kind of limited by what the ability of the LLMs is, right? So one of the things that they're really bad at is making sure that any output that they generate is like of a specific length. Like it's, like 10 characters, or if you're writing a tweet, like 280 characters or something. LLMs are horrible at like being able to count characters. And so what I hear is like, okay, I'm using this guardrail, but it's not still getting me a response within 280 characters outside of truncation. And it's like, yeah, well, if like guardrails can't imbue these LLMs with the capability if they don't have it, it's basically like on them to be able to generate something. We can essentially check if any constraint you care about is like actually verified and like handled correctly. Yeah.
So I have this one scenario very usually coming up. So we are a bank, right? And we allow people to use ChatGPT. We just allow it. So people might unintentionally, add PII data into ChatGPT in order to generate something. So maybe it's from slides, maybe it's from something you share. So what is the user experience? So let's say I want to make sure we are safe. I am a CEO or CTO or someone. What's the user experience of plugging this in, and how do we block everything so that it doesn't happen?
Yeah, great question. I think like if you're a CTO and what you're doing is like, okay, here's a ChatGPT endpoint, and using that ChatGPT endpoint, my engineering org can build an application that they put in front of customers. I think like what the user experience would be like is like, look up our open source framework, pip install it, any correctness checks, you can essentially inject that into the code. And then before sending any output out or like getting any output back, you can basically make sure that there's no PII in the check, right? So it's at the end of the day, like a coding framework, and you can basically work with it as you would like any other library. If you are not doing that, like the alternative is that you're providing ChatGPT, like you're providing your entire organization with the ability to use ChatGPT, that is only company specific. I think you can basically do this on the company level where you essentially have like some organization-wide guardrails that like there's no PII that ever leaves the organization. So there's like two ways to do that.
Thank you. I think we're running out of time. So thank you for being with us, Shreya, and maybe a few words from your side where we can find you, where the listeners can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the easiest way to look us up is on GitHub. We are guardrails-AI/guardrails. If you just Google search guardrails space AI, like we're the top result. I think like other places where you can like regularly keep up with updates is our website, guardrailsai.com, our Twitter, guardrailsai, or my own personal Twitter, Shreya R, or you can like follow our LinkedIn page.